What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Tendo Show. We've got a pretty good show planned for you today. We're going to talk about the trip that we just got back from. Did lots of thrifting, saw lots of family. We're going to talk a little bit about the Suicide Squad movie at the end. I don't think we'll get too far into any spoilers, so do stick around for that because I've got some spicy things to say about it, I think. And yeah, we're just going to chat a little bit about everything going on with us. So welcome. I'm glad you're here. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. And come back weekly for regular podcasts now. And I think come winter, we're going to have 2 shows a week on this channel. So look forward to that because we're going to have a pre-tape podcast every week and a live show every week. It's looking like I'm very much so looking forward to that. But we figured we'd wait till winter when it's not 1,000 degrees. Even in our nice, cool, air-conditioned apartment, you pretty much have to sit like this in order to not be hot when it's 120 degrees out.
I think that's just you. I'm like chilling in a sweatshirt sometimes.
Yeah, it is just me, but it really is a thing because like we have done live shows on our main channel on and off for 2 years now. I mean, we're coming close to 2 years, but it's pretty much been that. Like we're going strong and then we just stop doing them and everyone's like, what's wrong? And I'm pretty much, I don't ever really say anything, but I'm like, it's too hot.
I'm gonna be a sweaty mess.
Yeah, I just don't want to. I don't want to put nice clothes on and stand in front of a live camera when it's 1,000 degrees. Just there's not a lot we could do about it, other than maybe perhaps getting like a window unit.
Yeah,
like one of those nice, not like a square box window unit, but like a hose to the outside.
Yeah, I've seen some windows in our apartment complex have those.
Yeah,
so I know that's a thing.
Yeah, I've thought about getting them because that's the thing. Like right now, you can't hear our air conditioner because it's turned off. But anytime we want to tape anything in our house, and this is just kind of the product of living in an apartment in a place where you have to have swamp coolers and not traditional air conditioners. Anytime we have to film anything, we chill out for a little while. And then we just turn the air conditioner off and go. And I try really hard not to get hot before it's over.
Yeah.
Because the swamp coolers are just these giant fans blowing fans past cooled water. I mean, that's essentially what air conditioners are. But there's not like chemicals in the machine like your car, like your car's air conditioner system or a lot of traditional home air conditioner systems. It's just different. So I don't like it, and that's if you've ever watched our channels and wondered where the live shows went, we pretty much always quit when it gets to summertime. Yeah. It's the way it's went this far.
Kind of same with the bins videos a bit too. They start to slow down.
100%. You'll see in the middle of winter, but at least back when we were doing daily videos, it would be Goodwill bins every day of the week sometimes. But as soon as it's hot outside, I'm like, not going.
I mean, even the last time we went there, which is fairly recently, the front half of the store was like, it's just tolerable. It's fine. And then you go into the back half of the store, and I'm like, oh, God, I don't want to be back here.
Yeah, it's a miserable mess, and it gets a little bit more humid back there than anywhere else in such a non-humid place, such a non-humid town. It sucks. The heat here sucks. You know what? Matter of fact, I texted one of our good friends here in town, friend of the show, Dan and Lisa. You've seen their videos and seen them on our channel. I texted him day before last. I was just having a miserable day in this heat, and I texted him. I was like, I can't do another summer here. Got to find a way out.
Abort.
I was being a little dramatic, but I would love to be able to afford like a summer home and a winter home, like some of these rich folk do.
Oh, fancy!
I love it here this winter. I think, matter of fact, the thing I always loved about living in LA when we lived there was the weather.
Yeah.
I loved it. I was always, you could be in the crummiest part of town, but you still walk outside and it's 70 degrees and not that humid and just felt great. I've missed that terribly, but I've always said it's the best weather on earth, but I will say wintertime here is better. Yeah. It's perfect here in the winter. It's dry. It's not hot. It's just perfectly breezy and cool. But it only lasts a few months, and it's back to scorching heat, so it's not perfect year-round. I can't be here, But if you drive a couple hours north of Phoenix here where we live, in wintertime it's freezing, but throughout the summer it feels just like winter here.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe we need to find a little cabin in the woods up north to build onto and renovate.
Yeah, that could work.
And just spend our winters up there. But I say that little cabins in the woods up there have really high costs. property values up there are through the roof. But anyways, we're going to talk a little bit about the trip that we just got back from before we get into talking about a little bit about some superhero movies. You know, I've got a lot to say about that, but I want to start off talking about my favorite part of our trip we just took. And I guess we'll start talking about that by talking about the dishes you took my grandmother. So anytime I talk about going home, I'm probably going to talk about my grandmother. If you guys don't know, my grandmother raised me, and she's the most wonderful woman in the world. And last time we were in, I wasn't part of the conversation, so you can tell them how it went. But my grandmother asked if we could find her some bowls.
Yeah. So whenever we go back to Kentucky, I make a point to spend some time with your grandmother, and just we both do. I mean, we both this time I think separately spent a little bit of time with her. But last time I sat in the kitchen with her and chatted with her about her dishes. She's got a lovely collection of just all kinds of vintage dishes. And one that stood out to me in particular was one that was in her china cabinet, which was her set of Hazel Atlas dishes. They were just a beautiful, they're kind of a rainbow collection. So she's got some pink, some blue, some green, and just kind of like this array of a set. And I thought it was really beautiful. I always thought having a set of different colors would be really nice.
Well, show me what they look like. What are they called?
Hazel Atlas.
Okay. These guys right here. She has a set of these.
Yeah, and they're stunning. They're just this like beautiful pastel color. And she told me about them. She said part of the set was my grandmother's, and part of the set, whenever she died, she gave them to me, and then I pieced together some more of the set. And so she was telling me about this woman that had the bulk of the set she has, and she kept buying them from her until she took over that woman's entire collection.
That's awesome.
And she's got a set underneath of the Hazel Atlas dishes, a set of Fire King, which are the milk glass plates with the gold trim on them. If you've been to any thrift store, you've seen one of these dishes. They are very common.
Do they come up here? This is them?
That's all
okay,
of them.
yeah. Oh, I 100% recognize these.
Yeah, they're beautiful dishes as well.
You know, well, I want you to keep going, but what's funny about all of this that we're looking at, I don't remember eating off of any of this. So,
well, I'd imagine not. I know she spent a lot of time and money putting that set together, so that's the fine china.
Yeah.
You big brute boys. Like, she's not giving you any of those dishes to eat off of.
I don't think she gave anybody those dishes to eat off of. I just wanted to say that to illustrate a point. If you want to know where the collecting of nice things comes from, I mean, this is it. This stuff, my grandmother has collected and curated the displays for this stuff all my life. They've always been in nice cabinets around the house.
Oh, yeah. And you walk into your grandparents' house and you can't help but notice a million things in there that are just really unique pieces. It's just full of really awesome vintage stuff.
And it was even better when I was younger for a lot of reasons. One of the biggest being my grandfather worked on clocks. So there used to just be an enormous amount of clocks hanging around the house, and he would always wind them up, and they'd always go off about the same time during the day. So there was always vintage clocks. They've always had just some unique vintage art, usually horses. I think there's still some horse paintings hanging up in their house. I have a video I'm going to play, so you can keep talking about the dishes, and I'll let this play. You might just see some of what I'm talking about around their house. Just clocks and interesting art everywhere. But go ahead and keep talking about the dishes.
Well, I knew that this would be something that we could talk about because it's something that she obviously feels passionately about, and so do I. So we had that in common, and we sat down at her kitchen table, and I noticed her fruit bowl was a big red Pyrex bowl.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, you do have a Pyrex. I never noticed that this was sitting here. This has probably been here forever, hasn't it? She's like, yeah, totally. And I was like, well, I have a full set of these Pyrex bowls, and I love them. They're my favorite. And she's like, I've always wanted a set. I'm like, you don't have one? She's like, no, I just have that one bowl, which I think was also her grandmother's. And I was like, well, shoot. Like, you should definitely have one. She goes, well, if you come across one, let me know. And
right.
I was like, I'm more than happy to get you a set. I will find you one. And I got a little bit discouraged while I was looking for it, not gonna lie, because like I found one piece and then another piece a little bit later, and I wasn't able to find a set that like went together. And I was like kind of bummed about that. And I was like, we're gonna go back home and I'm gonna have to tell her like I didn't find one. I'm sorry. And or I would have had to go to an antique mall and like pay full price for a bunch of them, and
which
just get 'em.
at some point going home we would have done.
Yeah, I would have been more than happy to do it, but I managed to find that entire primary set at a Goodwill. They were all individually priced, but they were all super cheap. Which honestly, that set was in terrible condition whenever I found it. Like the blue bowl was awful, the red bowl was worse, the green bowl was fine. And the yellow bowl is the yellow bowl I actually ended up giving her. It was perfectly fine. The yellow bowls are hard to mess up.
Yeah.
But I ended up swapping out a few of the bowls that I had pieces for in my antique mall already, and just gave her a really nice full primary set. And now we match. She's got the same set I do, and she's got the same set my mom does, and that my grandmother had. Like,
that's awesome.
That's super cool to me.
Well, she was very happy. She was definitely holding back tears, and I was happy because it's really hard to explain this, and I don't want to get too deep in it, but she has loved dishes my whole life, and I never once while living with her ever appreciated it, ever understood it, ever thought about it. And this goes really deep. My grandfather with the clocks, and I wouldn't call him a hoarder, but I would say he was just about like me. You see these shelves full of things back here of this curated stuff. He had boxes and boxes of stuff he liked. When he went to a yard sale and there was a yo-yo, for anything less than a quarter, he bought it. And by the time he died, he had baskets and baskets of yo-yos just laying around. And, I've never once saw him put a yo-yo on his finger. I never really understood it. I never really thought about it. But he did that, and it's weird because at that time when I was living with them and stuff, I probably collected Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh and certain toys the exact same way, but I didn't in my mind realize it was the same thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The exact same thing, because I inherited it from them. It's, if not in our DNA, it's in our passed down learned psyche as we have as a human race. And my grandfather died, what's it been now? It's been several years now. It feels like last year, every year.
Yeah, it
was
does.
like, because just a few years ago, it was like, oh yeah, last February. And now I don't even know how many years. I don't remember what year he died, because it just feels like a few years ago. But it seemed like I never understood it all until I was flying home for his funeral. And I hadn't really cried yet. And I wasn't sure how it was going to go, because we had an interesting living situation growing up. My father was there and had a hand in raising us, certainly. We were most of the time with him, but we lived at my grandmother's, and she fed us and clothed us and sewed our clothes, cooked our food, and was our mother, right? So my grandfather was always there, and he certainly took us fishing and did things with us, but there was never a strong relationship with him. There just wasn't. It wasn't ever bad, just not a strong relationship. So when he died, I didn't know what to feel, because I don't know how to explain it other than that. I just didn't know how to feel about it. So I got a call at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and Papaw died. My little brother was crying. He'd found my grandfather dead, and I can understand that. I can understand crying. Like, never seen a dead body. Oh my God.
Yeah, the shock of it.
Yeah, or not never seen a dead body, but like outside of a funeral, never seen one. So,
well, and he died unexpectedly too. He wasn't sick. He was
he was just old.
Yeah.
just adequately old. And so I got the call, and I was like, okay, well, I gotta go home. I ordered my plane ticket within minutes, and I was on a plane within an hour and a half of that.
Yeah.
And so you don't have a lot of time to cry or think about it. But I was on the plane, and I was like, well, what do I do with this 3-hour flight? And I was like, well, they'll probably ask me to say something at the funeral. So I was like, I'll write something about it. So I sat down and started writing what I thought about, the whole thing. And then about halfway through writing that down, I started bawling. I was like, oh, okay, here it is. Here's the emotion that was being held back. But in writing that piece and stuff, I started to realize like the collecting rabbit hole we were going down, about to go down for this channel, because it was right before we started this channel, and I was at that time conceptualizing, what I was going to do, and I already had some stuff laying around, and I already felt this desire to I always use the word curated, but I already had this desire to curate these collections and put stuff on display, and it was that exact moment on that airplane to his funeral where I was like, I want to collect things. I am literally this same man. And then going home for his funeral became so much different than it would have been, because then all of a sudden I'm standing in his house, which you see in this shot from this YouTube video from last week's video, which go back and watch it if you haven't. You see his clocks. Look here, clock. You see that clock? Clock there. Just to the left of my little brother's head here is a clock that you're not going to see on the screen. And this glass, what do you call these?
Curio cabinet.
Curio, is that the actual name for it?
China cabinet is the normal term.
It's a China cabinet. There are little bitty nice display clocks in here behind my grandmother's head over here. Clock, 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 clock. And he just loved this stuff. Oh, and I didn't even see that one. I don't know what you call those. Something.
Yeah, those are like the gas and the meter things.
Yeah, they're
right?
all, I don't know. They're like, I think one's a thermometer or one's a clock. It's something for boat captains. I don't know. But he would, if he were here, he'd tell you exactly what it was. And so I go home for his funeral, and I'm just like, it's like, I don't know. It's like I had foggy glasses on. I took them off, and then it all just made sense in such a weird way where, I don't beat myself up for this, but I do understand human nature, and it's certainly true that, chemically speaking in your brain, you're basically just a full-blown narcissist until you're 25 or 26. If you're watching and you're younger than that, don't take that as an offense. Just realize that, the control or lack thereof that you have over your emotions does and will change. And, when he died, I was probably 27 or something like that. I can't do the math because we just went through COVID and nothing pre-COVID makes any sense anymore. Yeah. But it just was such a weird, it was an out-of-body experience walking through their house the first time after he died, because I just realized, I was like, even though I didn't, I have such a special place in my heart for my grandmother, and I never really, at the time, put my grandfather in such a special place. He owned a place there anyways, because I was so much more like him than I ever knew. I ever had any idea. And as I walked through his house that first time after he died, I realized it.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It goes deeper than that. And I don't really intend to make this whole podcast about exactly that. But they're just one of these days when it makes way more sense too. I need to just go through that house and put some of it on video. I already hugely regret not demanding he sit down with me on camera and just talking for a whole day about his childhood and stuff, because now that he's gone, of course, I realize some of the stories he would tell me about his childhood are just incredibly awesome.
Yeah.
To be a child in the early 40s, it's not something that most of us are going to, most of you watching this are going to know anything about. I know we have a couple senior citizens viewers that are way up there, to possibly have been around in the late 40s and remember it, but it's odd to say. I think he would have been born, I guess, in like, I always get it backwards, who's older, my grandmother or him. I think my grandmother. So he's probably born in like 39, 40. So the stories he would tell on his about being on his grandparents' farm would have probably happened in like 45, 46.
Yeah.
Crazy time to be alive. But I there's a lot more to say, because the other thing that happened while we were home is you gave her those dishes, right?
Right.
Do you have anything else to say? Is there any more of the story you want to say before I move on? Because I want to talk about the Wind-Chime.
Oh. Well, I was able to sit down and talk with her a little bit more about other things in her house too. So it was kind of nice that you don't have that passion for dishes, and there's now finally someone in her life that does.
Totally.
And, like, she could talk to him.
I didn't think about that. She has such a burning passion for them, and I need to sit down and talk with him about her because I think she'll be surprised how much I've learned.
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
fact that I even know what Pyrex is probably make her go, "What?"
Well, I mean, she's got like right behind you, the camera here. There are shelves and shelves and shelves of milk glass.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's just like that's why I was so shocked that she didn't have a Pyrex set. I'm like, that is like the milk glass set. Like, what do you mean you don't have one? But it's just not something that she got at that point. So well, it's funny now knowing her collection and the things that she's passionate about, the things that I notice at thrift stores now. And like that, you remember that time we went to a Goodwill and there was like an entire shelf full of milk glass there. And I was just like, holy cow.
I called her. I left and called her. I was like, Granny, you know how you collect all those milk glass? Like she didn't know.
Yeah.
You know how you collect those milk glass? She's like, yeah. I was like, I've been doing this thrifting thing. I've thrifted every day, multiple thrift stores for 2 years now. I've barely seen any. And then we walk into a Goodwill today and there's like 100.
Yeah.
And
It's like someone's collection was sitting there.
yeah, and she's old enough now that she's no longer in a place where her collection of milk glass, which is the main thing I would say she collects, is her collection's no longer growing.
Yeah.
I would say she sourced all of it from yard sales. I
Yeah.
mean, so much of our love for thrifting and that kind of thing came from flea markets and yard sales and a little bit of thrifting growing up. And she's not able-bodied enough to do that anymore. And so, and she's not able, more so than that, she's not able-bodied enough to really clean it all. And because, you know, dishes, especially in a dusty place like Kentucky.
Especially when they're white.
Yeah, especially when they're all white, they get really dirty. So, you know, that used to be a thing. Once a year or so she'd just get all her dishes in one place and wipe them off and put them back on the shelves. But Hannah's right. What she was mentioning right here behind, so I'm filming these guys, but behind me, literally in the chair, behind the chair I'm sitting in, there's these half the height of these IKEA bookshelves, a couple of them, and they're just all milk glass. And I think they're actually like her nicer pieces.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. And I don't want to get too much on the morbid side, but you know, she's up there in the years, and I mean, I'm talking about her like she's 200. She's you know, she being born in 38, she's definitely not like crazy old. She's not like 9. There's going to be a 95-year-old watching me like, I'm not old. She did have an aneurysm a couple years ago. So her health, she's fine. Honestly, she gets around fine.
Yeah, she's way better than she was last year. Even.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing. The odd thing about it. How many years ago was this now? It was while my grandfather was still alive. So, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, she had an aneurysm and was kind of bad, or her brain didn't quite work right. But it's so weird because every year since that we go home now, she's better and better and better. And it's weird that something like that could happen. And, you know, the recovery from it is still a very real thing. And so, you know, every time we go home, she's a little bit sharper. And it's all so funny too because she's such a sharp person as it is. So like, she's just all but a math genius growing up. It's like, Granny, what's 432 times 6? And she's like, and she'd tell you, you know. And so after her aneurysm, little things like that she couldn't do anymore. But I've noticed those little skills she has like seep back in, and it's nice. It's really nice spending time with her, and you know, kind of her having her wit back. But I want to talk about something that just made all this even better, right? Because I was very happy to leave with having given her dishes, and I can't tell you how happy inside that made me. But it just got even better because while we were there, I'm sitting in the living room with my little brother, and he at one point looks over at me and he points at this wind chime. And I didn't ask nothing about it, but there's this little wind chime behind Hannah's head, and I was like, that's odd. You know, it's kind of out of place amongst all these nice antiques. And, you know, here's this 200-year-old chair back here and just really nice antiques. And my little brother says, you see that wind chime? I was like, yeah. He's like, well, Granny asked for a wind chime for her birthday. And I was like, okay, yeah, it sounds like something she'd asked for. And she said, Dad came home with one on her birthday and hung it right there. And he's like, you could just kind of see the disappointment on her face. And we laughed really hard about it because it's my dad just kind of missed the point. And what it is I knew instantly why she wanted one, and it's because my grandmother's favorite thing is to sit outside on her patio and just chill out. And my whole life out on her patio, there's just been this giant wind chime. I might be misremembering the size of it because I was so small at the time, but she had this giant wind chime. And you know what? I've always felt a little guilty because she always wants her garden to be nice. And now these last several years that she's gotten kind of older, it's been impossible for her to work on the garden. Now, thank God, my sister, the saving grace in this situation, she has taken care of that garden, and I'm eternally thankful for her for that. But the thing that separates my sister from me is that she doesn't and has never had poison ivy. And in Kentucky, anywhere that green things grow, there's going to be poison ivy, and there's a good enough amount of it in my grandmother's yard. Matter of fact, we're not going to be able to show it off on camera, but Hannah and I both are sitting here with some spots, simply because, God, this story just is going to go on forever. The last dog that my grandmother had from my childhood, it was a 22-year-old Jack Russell Terrier, 22 years old, and it was an evil little shit.
Too mean to die. But
it finally died and went to hell. And it is the worst dog ever. It loved her, though. I will say,
it's always nice to be.
He was fine. He was just grumpy. There were two of them. And one of them died back around when my grandfather died. And it was sweet. It was the sweetest little dog and the most playful dog I've ever seen in my life. But they were just two sides of the same coin, a little angel and a little devil. And I guess that makes sense. I'm sure a lot of you people that have two children probably know what I'm talking about.
No, never.
Absolutely.
All children are angels.
The honest ones will know what I'm talking about. But the dog had just died like a few days before we came in. And I get there, my little brother's like, dude, I'm covered in poison ivy because I buried Sam. And he said some expletives about it because he was like, that dang dog got me again. He buried the dog out in the yard and got some poison ivy. And I was like, I'm not hugging you. Don't touch me. And my brother and I are pretty close. We'd definitely be hugging up on each other and usually wrestling. We usually wrestle each other one good time while I'm in. And that didn't happen because and reportedly, when you grow up around poison ivy and you get it a lot like I did, you learn, they say, you can't really get it from someone, and if you do, it's because they're only recently exposed and you're just getting the oil. It's the oil from the plant that gives it to you, and not really the excrements from the bubbles that poison ivy causes, right?
The seepage.
That's what you hear. But at the same time, I got enough shots for poison ivy over the years that I would ask the doctors every time, and to be honest with you, most doctors that I ever asked questions about poison ivy gave pretty contradictory answers. It's kind of like, it's one of those medical marvels like Diet Coke. Oh, it's worse. Oh, but it's not. Oh, but they're both bad. It's like, it's just, the honest truth is Coke and Diet Coke are both bad. Stay away from them if you can. If you're addicted like I am, do your best with whatever. If you want diabetes or cancer, I mean, that's not really something to joke about, but that's what they say. Regular Coke, sugar is going to give you diabetes, and who knows what the heck aspartame is going to do to you. Poison ivy, poison oak, poison sumac, the main three of the. I'm not going to be able to pronounce it. If there's any botanists listening, they're going to laugh at me, but it's like toxicodrin. I mean, I do have my computer open in front of me. We could probably Google this one. There's an oil that poison ivy excretes, and it's like rus toxicodrin. I don't know. Yeah. Hey, I got it right. So that's the I don't know if that's the pronunciation, but rus toxicodrin is the oil that poison ivy excretes, and I've always heard that you can fit. It just takes enough oil from the tip of a needle. The tip of a needle will hold enough of that oil to infect the whole world with a rash, which just makes my head hurt, right? Because if you've ever had poison ivy, you know that like you get a little bit and it spreads and it spreads and you're just like, how is there enough to get all over me and everyone else? And the last time I had poison ivy, at least to my memory, we traveled back to my hometown. It's always my hometown. Where else do I go romping through the woods, really? We went back to my hometown to shoot my first film I ever made. This terrible but still awesome because it was my first film we made. And the last day of shooting, I wasn't even in the scene, but throughout the film that we made, there were these little kids that would play us in our flashbacks. And we would just happen to be shooting at this location where we filmed my death scene in this film. And we look out across the street, and there's this beautiful field that went up a hill, and it was just the right time. And we were like, oh, let's run over there and get this scene. And we had the kids run up this hill into the sunset. It just worked out really well. And I went home from that field with poison ivy all over me.
Rip.
And it was so bad that time, I was just like, never again. And of course, soon after we moved to LA, right? But we moved to a part of the country where there's not so much of it. So it was easier to stay away from it. It's really easy to stay away from it here in Phoenix because poison ivy, poison oak, and poison sumac, they all only really grow in places that are pretty much humid. It takes moisture for it to grow. So I've been able to stay away from it, but my brother was covered in it from burying the dog, and I'll be honest with you, I'm super thankful we didn't get it bad. We just got little dots here and there, and but I know I was exposed enough to it to get it bad. And that's the other thing about poison ivy that I've never read a medical report about, but I've always had my suspicions. People will say, and I bet there's plenty of people watching that will say, and please comment if this is the case, but there's a lot of people who say, oh, I'm not allergic to it. Oh, my brother so-and-so always got it. I never did. People even like my stepfather, I recall him saying earlier on that he was never allergic to it, but I think now that he's getting older, he's had it a couple times, are just examples to serve to like, I think your body has immunities to it and builds up immunities to it, but also loses it and breaks down. Your immunities break down with exposure to it. So I feel like we lucked out this time because we went near it and we didn't break out to it bad.
Yeah.
Because we've been away from it for so long. But I also feel like next time we go home, we've got to be super careful because if the way that I perceive it is that because of the patterns with which I've been exposed and had it or not, I personally feel like if we go back to it again now, we might get it really bad, which is all very odd because I'm not a medical expert. I know nothing, but I also, I've got some experience here. But anyways, that was a long offshoot of the story. My brother had poison ivy, and why did I even bring it up in the first place?
The Wind-Chime.
The Wind-Chime. Well, I know. I know to go back to the Wind-Chime right now. I just don't remember why it was important. I guess it's just important because he was actually like, we were practically socially distanced because, I didn't want him to touch me. I didn't want, if he still had some of that. That's why. Because the Bruce toxicodrin, the oil that might have been on him, I was like, just don't come near me. I don't want to touch you. I don't want And he was messing with me the whole time. He'd be like, he'd act like he's reaching toward me. I was like, I'm going to punch you in the face. But yeah, this Wind-Chime, and I'm like, oh, okay. So, my grandmother likes it. It's there. It's nice. It's pretty. But she was thinking of something a little bit different. So I'll show you here. I've got some pictures my brother sent me. And I'm going to go through them and show you how this Wind-Chime situation played out. But basically, I was like, oh, no. I was like, oh, I understand the situation fully. I whipped out my phone, and I searched on Amazon for Wind-Chimes. And I pretty quickly saw that there was plenty of options. But I was a little bit kind of disheartened immediately because you see these options that come up on Amazon immediately, and they're all pretty short. These are all about a foot tall. You can just tell by looking. They're not that tall. And I was like, I got to buy this woman the biggest Wind-Chime I can find. And I'm just looking, and I'm scrolling. And honestly, I went pretty deep before I found one that was satisfactorily large enough. Like you see these here, they're getting longer. And I think I just started searching numbers because you can see these say like 36 inches. I think I started searching like 50 inches and stuff like that. But I eventually found basically what was the biggest one on Amazon, or maybe not the biggest, but roughly the biggest. And I ordered one. I think it was like 65 inches or something like that. I can't remember exactly. But so on our trip, and I'm only talking about all this now because I thought about putting it in our video that's coming out tomorrow, but like I didn't film anything regarding this. I just have these pictures. So I figured the podcast would be a better place to talk about this. So I order it then, and it's like Sunday, but we're leaving the next day. And so I was like, I'm going to order it, Granny. I showed her a couple. I was like, you want silver or gold? She's like, I like silver. I was like, check. I made sure it was what she wanted. I was like, how big do you want it? Because like if she didn't want a big one, I didn't want to get her a big one. She's like, like we used to have, because there used to be one hanging outside. I was like, all right, got it. And so I ordered the big one. And I was like, okay, but it's not gonna be here till Tuesday. I'll have Dakota come put it up, and she's like, okay, great, I love you, thank you so much. And again, just like after this was all pretty much the same day. Dishes.
Yeah, it was like maybe an hour after the dishes.
Yeah, dishes, Wind-Chime. She was like, it's Christmas, baby. And so I go back in the other room. I was like, Dakota, I just ordered this Wind-Chime. Will you pretty please come back Tuesday just as soon as you can and put it up? He was like, absolutely. And so sure enough, we're back in Texas at this point, sitting with our good friends Ivan and Monique, and I get a text from my brother, and it looks like this. Actually, I think my pictures are out of order. Yeah, so we'll go from top to bottom. He sends me this picture. This is like just awesome to see. Huge Wind-Chime out in front of the house. So this is laying out in front of the house. And I'm just like, sweet, it's there. We go ahead and put it up. I was like, if you need to go buy tools or whatever, like I'll pay for them. And it wasn't seconds later that he sends me this picture. So here's outside of their house, the backyard. Now the backyard is like where things actually are. The front of my house is like not actually, or the front of the house I grew up is not actually used. It's just like storage. And this sounds odd, but I don't know. I'd have to draw a diagram for you to really understand. The house I grew up in just has weird street access. So everyone enters it from the back door, from the back door, but from the side of the house. You park on the side of the house and go in the back.
Well, I feel like that's pretty common. A lot of people will park in their driveway and then go through the back porch.
Or a lot of people go in through the garage and stuff like that. Yeah, but it is common to not use your front door. But the way in which you access our back door, a lot of people think the back of the house is the front because it's nice and presentable. Whereas the front's almost inaccessible, so because it's just not used. But this picture here is funny because this is where the old one hung. So you see this, and my brother sends me a text message and says, here's where the old one was, and you can see it was, it was one of those bigger ones. Once they all hung down, the chimes were, down to here. It was a couple feet tall. Just a side note, not part of the story, but this wagon wheel right here used to be grapevines, so we grew up always having grapevines. But the poison ivy and where they buried the dog was right over here. This bush has some growing out of it, so that's where all that happened. But this was good. This was a good start. He sent me a picture of the box, and then he sent me a picture of where the old one was, and then surprise. The next picture. This is like, I don't know how to explain this to you. My brother just hit this one out of the park. For some reason to me, I was just like, this is an artistic, beautiful photo that I need to have. Like, I don't know. I'm obsessed with it because there's my grandmother just standing there looking at it, smiling. And she probably has no idea my little brother's taking a picture. But I was just like, he sent me those first two pictures and then sent me this one. And I all but started crying because, I don't have, there's not a lot of pictures of any of my family at all. There's very few pictures of us from childhood. I don't have a lot of pictures of my grandmother. I didn't do this on purpose, but my backpack, it's not in here. I'd show you. My backpack, there's a picture of my grandmother in it, and I never kept it in there for sentimental reasons. I just put it in there one time because I found it digging through some stuff back home, and I put it in there to take it home and scan it or something, and then I left it, and I just laugh every time I find it. But she's like a strong 40-year-old woman in this photo, So she's at that point at 40, so she raised me from kids. So my earliest memories of her are probably in her 50s, mathematically speaking. And I don't really know what she would have looked like in her 40s, but at 40 she looked more like what I remember than she would have at 20. I mean, I would say that's safe to say, right? And so I put this picture of her in my backpack. She just looks so badass, but it's been in there, so I find it once every few months and just laugh at it, and cherish it and put it back. So I think I feel extra special about this photo because I just don't have a lot of photos of her. And this is such a great one. Just, it's perfectly composed. Her on the left, Wind-Chime on the right. Just real joy. And not to mention, there's an ongoing joke with me and my little brother that his phone's just crap because he just buys a cheap phone at Walmart or whatever every so often. But, this is a good photo. It's just perfectly fine. So he sent me a couple more photos. There she is just looking at it. And there she is looking at the camera. And, there's her wind chime. And it is a big one. It looks, in this photo, it looks half as tall as her, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm very happy about it. And I'm eternally grateful to my little brother, my older sister, for taking care of things, my dad taking care of things, taking care of her, because we are just so far away. I mean, I think this trip we just got back from kind of reiterates this in my head. It's just so far away. It's 24 hours driving straight if you don't stop, and that's far. And if the older I get and we make that trip again, the further it feels. It just feels we're definitely just going to have to start like saying, doesn't matter what, July and Christmas, we're getting airplane tickets and flying in.
Yeah.
But that's the story of the wind chime and the dishes and everything, and I'm glad to have gone and left my grandmother a little happier because she, like us, likes nice stuff hanging around. So now what I've got to do is not get obsessive about it and take her 13 wind chimes next time we go, because that is who I am as a person.
Yeah.
Because we do all this thrifting and stuff on this channel, we will very often, and Hannah can definitely attest to this, we will very often have people say, well, hey, if you ever see this out and about, will you pick it up for me? And we're always like, be careful what you ask for.
Do you want 87 of them?
Yes, exactly. I've got a good buddy of mine from childhood that kind of wants to collect lightsabers, and I'm like, man, you don't want me to bring you a box of lightsabers. And I have some saved up for him, and I've almost been saving them for a couple of years because, he's got a nice uncluttered house. He doesn't live like we do, and him and his family aren't going to be happy with the clutter. Basically, if I take home these 200 lightsabers, or another good example, and this is always the case. It's always like a significant other doesn't want the clutter, or there just isn't that kind of room for the clutter. But like one of my older brothers collects golf clubs, and has just one of his burning passions in life has been to own a whole set of wooden golf clubs.
Super old.
Which is super fascinating to me. Don't really care about golf, don't really care about golf clubs, but the idea of collecting something so old and completing a set, if you don't know me, you just need to understand that exact kind of thing just gets me going. And it's hard for people to understand because like even my brother probably doesn't understand it perfectly, because for me it's an obsession. It's a scratch that I need to itch. It's an itch that I need to scratch, I think I should say. And so he told me early on, I just have this idea of a old golf bag from the early 1900s, late 1800s in my office, but with an actual complete playable set of clubs. And I was like, great, I'm on it. And over the course of the last 2 years since that conversation, I've probably taken him 8 to 10 clubs. And I don't know exactly how many a set is or was at that time, but that doesn't matter because we don't just want a bag of random clubs. We want a bag of whatever a golfer needs, the chipper, the putter, the driver, right? And each one. So I take him everything I find, and I let him sort it out. You keep them, get rid of them, trade them to your buddies, whatever you want to do, no big deal. But it's funny because every time I find one, he says, man, if it's worth too much money, don't worry about me, just sell it, because he knows we're resellers. And I'm like, and I've told him, I was like, it would have to be worth a fortune for me to care more about selling it than putting it in your collection. And I mean a fortune. Even if it's a $500 club, I don't care. That needs to be on your wall. I've got this room is full of $500 items. You know what I mean? I'm not worried about selling it to make the money. So that's just another example. And I'm saying this because my grandmother, like, don't ask me for wind chimes because I'm going to bring you wind chimes. Right?
For sure. I mean, well, we can get into this later to talk about my favorite thing of the trip. But
well, I mean, go ahead. I don't have much else to say. I just wanted to really make that clear. And I bet there's people watching that understand this because there's so many people that orbit our channel. This is my favorite word to describe you guys. You people in our orbit that are thrifters and resellers, et cetera, and you probably help your other people with your collections. And if this is the case, definitely comment this below because it's a good conversation I'd like to have. But that's the point I was making. I love doing what we do to bring people what they want. And the situation with Amazon and getting my grandmother one quick was just like, I've got to fill this. Like, she can't. I was like, my brain broke. I was like, she can't sit out there without the loudest wind chime possible, And now that wooden one my dad got, hopefully they hang it out there on a different part of the yard and you get a cool stereo effect because obviously the wood one's going to sound different. But I'm saying basically I was a little bummed I wasn't able to thrift her one, but I didn't know she needed one, or I'd have been looking out for one.
right, we probably could have found her one pretty easily.
Yeah.
I never pay attention to wind chimes at Goodwill.
Well, you better believe I will now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if maybe there aren't very many because they break on the way in or something. I don't know. I've really never paid attention to them.
I mean, if you're donating a wind chime and it's not in a box, it's over. You might as well throw it away. You're right.
Yeah.
But we end up in a lot of antique malls and stuff too where I can look for them. So I'd love to luck out and stumble across a giant one, an unbelievably stupid big one.
Yeah.
And then take it home and hang it up and then just kind of still giggle when she's like, it's too much, take it down.
Yeah.
Because I like doing the most, I guess. But anyway, so what was your favorite part of the trip?
So, well, the segue from this conversation is that my family doesn't collect like your family does.
Right.
But there are certain things that my mom specifically likes.
Yes.
Christmas in my house was always a very big deal. We had decorations that we bring out every single year. We have traditions of like, we bake cookies on this day. We do a big dinner thing, but we go to church on Christmas. We open the presents and then we eat dessert. Like that's the rule.
Yep.
And so, when Christmas would come around, the decorations would be something that is very exciting. Specifically, the I don't know how to get into it exactly because it is kind of odd.
It's I can't think of, it's as odd as my rubber ducks.
Yeah.
It's on that level.
My mom collects specifically crafted ugly snowmen. Like,
boom.
Like handmade, someone put time into this and it didn't go well, but they tried to sell it anyway. Like that snowman.
Like this paper mache one.
Like horrible. That one I wouldn't let her buy. Like that is horrendous.
She wouldn't have bought because this is where it gets really interesting. She has such specific.
Well, I can tell you.
She has a checklist of things that the snowmen have to meet, or else she won't buy them.
I can tell you where that evolved from. Like, I remember when she bought her first one. I was with her. There is this craft fair about 30 minutes or so south of our hometown. And my mom, my aunt, and my grandma would go to it every year. And I mean, it was like a flea market, but a craft fair specifically. And I remember this table sitting there with a bunch of snowmen that this woman had made. And she picked it up. And you know the one, you've seen it before. It's a big fat, like terry cloth snowman with like the full cloves, like whole cloves spice pieces. Has the little buttons up his shirt. He's got a little scarf on, and then he's got a big long.
Well, that's the problem with this portion of the story. I don't have any visual cues for it. We're gonna make a whole video one day. I'm gonna force your mother to give us a tour of her snowmen and talk about where she got them, because I don't remember them. I just know when you go home at Christmas time, there's a sad village of snowmen.
Well, you'll remember because, like, I'm getting there. It's got this long, big nose, and then the top of its head just had sticks coming out of it. So
I don't remember, but I can imagine.
Well, it just was this sad little pea head on a giant body, and just like we looked at this thing and laughed so hard. And it's like the woman that made it was sitting there, and of course, like we weren't trying to be offensive. We just thought it was just the funniest thing. We're like, this thing is adorable and hideous, and like she's like, I love it. I don't know, I need it. So she bought it. I was like, why did you buy that? That makes no sense. And she's like, it needs a home. And I want to give it one. And so that started the collection of ugly snowmen.
And
she now has like 20 or 30 of them.
And here's the one that on one of our latest episodes she bought while we were with her.
So this one, I am a little surprised she bought it because it is technically smiling.
It's not. That's not a smile. That's like
It's
Tim
a
Burton.
grimace.
It's like a Tim Burton permanently sewn on smile.
Well, she's got so many of them at this point. She was like, I'm going to buy one every year at this craft fair. And I remember the second year we went, I wanted to get one. And so I bought this little, it was so cute, honestly. It was a little sock that they like tied off with the scarf, and the bottom of the sock was full of rice, and it had a little wooden head on it. It was adorable. But then the next year it got full of bugs because the rice got in there. And so we had to take the thing apart and pull all the rice out and fill it with beads instead.
Put something else in it.
Yeah, but that was Snowman number 2. But
Do you remember all of them?
no, I don't. From there on, it kind of becomes a blur. But
Yeah, because she's probably got 20 or 30 now.
Yeah, she does. And so I know that like she wants to get the perfect one every single year. She doesn't want just any of them.
Yeah.
But
she passes up plenty.
yeah. And I find them all the time at thrift stores, like, because people get them as gifts, and they're like, "This thing's hideous. I don't want it." And they give it to the thrift store.
We are going to buy her one for her collection one day, but it does have to be perfect. It can't be smiling. It has to be sad.
It has to be pathetic.
I don't think she has any yet that just look evil.
No, but if she bought that paper mache one, that'd have been the first.
Yeah, that one was a little bit evil, but again, like that, it was so nice to have those dual experiences going to my home, going to your home, and like, you know, bringing our thrift culture with us, because we brought Granny stuff, and we always go out with your mother and go thrifting and go to antique malls and stuff, and or actually, was that our first time going to antique malls together?
It was, yeah. I know that she goes to some with her sister. And my oldest sister really loves antiquing. She just built this beautiful house, and she has filled it with beautiful curated pieces. So it's something that they do together a lot. And so when she suggested we go to antique malls, I was like, oh, okay, that would be a really nice thing for us to do.
Yeah, let's do it. We went to a bunch, like 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We found the potato head snowman.
Right. It's awful.
It's funny,
but it's such a cool thing to collect. But it's like, it's not the same as my rubber ducks, because I always make the joke that I essentially reluctantly collect rubber ducks.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's reluctant because I only ever bought one, and then everyone else bought them for me. She does buy these for herself, but it is still up there to that level of oddity, you know. Where it's just like, it doesn't really make sense until you see it. But then when Christmas time comes around, you know,
she pulls out her little village.
And, you know, most people just have a tree. It was pretty typical at a certain age for me that a lot of people always had a tree in a display. I don't know. I'd love to talk to your mom about this. I don't know if this is the case, if you guys kind of had that thing, but like just everywhere you went when I was a kid, it was a tree, and like my grandmother did a village with the glass houses.
Yeah, my mom did too. They were porcelain glasses. My sister painted a lot of them for her.
Nice. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, my grandmother kind of collected those, and she had a friend that always made her one every year or something like that. And yeah, we always had that. That was it. That was Christmas decorations. But so now for your mom, it's like Christmas tree, a gaggle of evil snowmen. Comment below? What do you call a horde of snowmen? There's definitely a word.
Yeah, we gotta have something creative.
God, I want to think about this one now. It's like I'm thinking of weird stuff though, like a reindeer games of snowmen, or I don't know. A frosty of snowmen. I don't know.
A ball of snowmen.
A ball of snowmen. Yeah, I don't know. We'll workshop this. Comment something below. But it was a good trip, and I think that's enough about that. Let's talk a little bit about Suicide Squad before we go. And again, if you're not into movie stuff at all, I guess you could turn the podcast off here. But I wanna do something I don't do very often, and give a highly recommended to this movie, the new Suicide Squad.
It was good. I liked it a lot.
It was, I will say, it's probably the best theater experience I've had in a long while. I mean, even pre-COVID. Obviously, we haven't been to the movies a whole bunch since COVID, so it would be a little bit goofy to say without pointing that out. But I mean, even before that, very few movies stand out in my head as specifically just like great theater experiences. And I'm not saying that because I want you to watch it in theater. Please go watch it on HBO if you don't want to go to the theater, or you want to stay safer. Absolutely. But I just, you get a little bit more immersion in a theater than in your house. And we were sitting there, on our own. They're still kind of distancing for COVID and stuff at theaters, and we're just sitting there, and I'm just loving this movie. Every minute of it, I'm waiting for what happens next, and I didn't expect to like it so much. But why don't you just give a rough idea of how you felt about it, and then I'll talk about a couple specifics, and then we'll wrap this bad boy up.
I had a lot of expectations going in what I thought it was going to be. In a lot of ways, it was exactly what I expected, but I think they kind of turned up the dial a little bit on...
Oh, yeah, to 13.
Yeah.
Not even to 11.
It was just like, I knew it would be a little silly. I knew there would be jokes and there would be this
you understood,
quirkiness.
You understood going in, right, that the guy who made Guardians of the Galaxy made this movie.
Right.
So
there was going to be a level of silliness.
Yeah, well, that sets plenty of expectations.
Yeah, and I was worried that maybe the silliness would take away from the movie or distract it, but I did think that it went hand in hand very well, and I thought that the movie as a whole was a very good experience of being serious, taking it seriously, but not too seriously.
Right. Well, I think that's the thing about this movie that I hope kind of changes things, though I don't think it did it on its own. Let me draw a little bit of a timeline for some of you comic book type people. I think Marvel on its own did a pretty good job of pushing the envelope movie to movie, year to year, with it being serious and real, but we're still talking about comic book heroes, and it pushed the needle. But then things started coming out like Taika Waititi's Thor movie, Love and Thunder, and it pushed the envelope, right? Just super silly. And I think this, even though this isn't a Marvel movie, it's a DC movie, but it's also a Marvel director, right? I don't know if he would want to be labeled as that. I don't think anyone would, just because nobody wants to be labeled for the one thing. But, it pushed this envelope of like, let's make it comic booky. And this is on the heels of Marvel making Loki, which pushed the margin of comic bookiness, right? If you watch Iron Man 1 from, when did that come out? 2001? I don't even know.
A while ago.
When did the first Iron Man movie come out? 2008. I honestly thought it was a little bit earlier than that, but that does make sense. That movie, they tried to ground way more realism into it than than any other superhero movies really had. That may not be a true statement, but like the superhero movies that you saw in the late 80s, early 90s were just, dumb, over the top B movies, or TV at that point had just been. I don't mean dumb as in like you shouldn't watch it. A lot of people have fond memories of it, but like dumb as in just goofy. I mean, just slapstick, really. And it's sort of been shied away from. I said to you, I think on the way from that movie, that like, as good as Christopher Nolan's Batman movies were, I think it set the tone in a direction that superhero movies weren't going to end up needing to go. And this is the thing. I read comic books growing up. Have you ever read a comic book?
No.
I read them pretty religiously up until middle school. So, I mean, that's not that old. But then even high school into college, I read a select few at times when I heard good things or in preparation for a movie. Like, I think it was post-high school when Watchmen came out, the movie. I read the whole graphic novel the same day, which was a mistake. But it was an interesting experience because that movie, up until its final scenes, sticks in an interestingly close way to the graphic novel. So I was just like too well prepared. It was just like, it was like watching a movie twice. It almost felt like. but it was an interesting experience because of how the ending of the movie was changed. That made it an interesting experience. But basically, what I'm saying is that I think there is an experience in movie and TV and streaming TV shows for comic book stuff that is way, 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 way more akin to the comic book reading experience than we ever would have thought. This is the major point I want to make about Suicide Squad and why I want you to go watch it so you can come back maybe to next week's episode or some episode down the line where we've got a little bit more momentum with this show and we can kind of schedule things ahead of time and have spoiler casts as people with podcast channels do. I would love to do that because I think we're snowballing right now into movie experiences, streaming show experiences that are way more comic book like than what we've had this far. Does this make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say something about how like it is a little bit confusing that I forget in the DC world that these places don't exist.
Right.
So I'm so used to like in Marvel it's like, oh, it's New York City, it's the Avengers Tower is over by that one building and everything like that. They want you to be like this is America,
right,
as it is, but in DC it's not. It's like this is Gotham and Metropolis and Corto Maltese and all that stuff, and it's just like, okay, so we're not at all in real America.
Right.
Like, this is not at all real. So but I mean, I guess Marvel does have other things that aren't real as well.
Well, there's a lot of cities in Marvel that are either just most of the cities. DC's way more popular for it. You've got Gotham, you've got Metropolis, you've got Star City. I'm sure there's plenty of that in Marvel, but it's not usually because the biggest characters in Marvel are always just like New York. Like, you know, they're just like, I think it's New York, New Jersey. That area is like Iron Man, Fantastic Four, right? Spider-Man. All the big hitters are pretty much there. And then later on there was like West Coast Avengers, and it's always very specific to real things in my memory. But I also read 1,000 DC comic books growing up to one Marvel. Like, that was the ratio. I just didn't read a ton of Marvel. Just pretty much Spider-Man at one point growing up. But yeah, the cities in a lot of these movies are either made up or they're very clearly supposed to be a real city. They just give it a different name. Like, I'm not sure, but I think like Sokovia, that comes up a lot in the Marvel Avengers movies and stuff, it's literally just like they show the actual city for one country and then they just call it something different, which you kind of have to do because so often in these superhero movies they're just destroying said cities. So I don't think anyone in any country really is going to feel that great if it's just like, oh, this specific Arab city is just destroyed off the map. I don't know. So they usually change it up.
Yeah. I mean, Wakanda, same deal.
Well,
that doesn't exist.
That's almost a different example of something all on its own. That's like, I don't know, that's more like DC. Just these wonderful metropolis-like cities that we've never heard of. Yeah. That's a very good example of what DC does. But Marvel doing what DC does.
Yeah, so it is kind of...
I'm sorry, one more thing. Marvel famously has some countries, too, like Doom. The villain Doom. Can you picture him? We can show everybody what Doom looks like, just in case you don't know. Well, of course, the video is going to come up. Let's type in Marvel Doom. This villain right here is the king of a country called Latveria, I think. Because I think, is it Latvia an actual country? Mm-hmm. And his country is Latveria. So I don't know. There you go. There's your Marvel school for the day. Continue what you were saying.
Well, it is kind of interesting to watch that, and I kind of like that level of this story doesn't exist because like they, this is Gotham. Nobody's been to Gotham,
right?
And it does kind of pull your suspension of disbelief a little bit further out. Whereas like with Marvel, it's like I do find myself distracted that like, oh, they're in New York City. They just destroyed all these buildings. Like
that you're vaguely familiar with already.
Yeah, you're like, that's someone's office building. And I start to kind of like feel really bad for the innocent people who are just getting their cars destroyed and their office buildings crushed.
That's always been a thing on two different levels. On one level, you have things like the Marvel movie that embraces it, right? By the time you got around to the second, third Avengers movie, they were like, or Civil War more so, it's like the Avengers are villains because they actually destroyed that city. They acknowledge it.
Yeah.
But we've seen so many superhero movies, space movies, whatever, where just like huge cities are destroyed and no one's talking about it, when Hulk smashes a whole building. But
the billions of dollars.
Yeah, well, but they do acknowledge it in these movies. They couldn't stay away from the realism of that. But let's point this back to Suicide Squad. There was a lot of big destruction going on in a movie like this, as you could imagine. And you're right. I did sit there while the movie was going on thinking about the city that it was called. I knew instantly the city that it all happens in was made up. Mm-hmm. And I remember the movie was over, and you were like, "Is that a real place?"
I was like, I don't know.
I was like, "Well, no, it's not." But it was I want to say the movie was overall a great experience, and we almost watched it again today. We were like, what are we gonna watch right now? And we were like, let's put it on and watch it again, because I think the craziness all over the placeness of the movie was like good to enjoy now, but it was like, now let's go watch it again and actually be able to pay attention to the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of subtleties that watching it again will definitely help you understand,
right?
Because there was so much, like you said this at the end of the movie, there was so much setup and payoff.
Yeah,
like every little thing.
That was gonna be my next point. I did say that as soon as the movie was over. I can think of very few movies where there's such a successful endless barrage of setup, the joke, payoff later. Like there's so many. Once you get to the end of Act 2 and the beginning of Act 3 in this movie, it's just like we're paying off every joke set up in the beginning of the movie, and that was nice. That was pretty refreshing. Let me ask you this. I want to get a little bit controversial. Do you like this movie more or less than Guardians of the Galaxy? And I don't mean to do that to be controversial. I wouldn't want to go up to someone like the filmmaker James Gunn and be like, "Hey, Suicide Squad was so much better than Guardians of the Galaxy."
Which Guardians did he do?
All of them.
He did all of them. Okay. Sorry, you can go ahead and say what
you're saying. I don't. This comparison's not for him, but for me, like, this might be my new favorite superhero movie.
Yeah, it was very good.
Well, and I think it's also important before we dive too far into that conversation to say, like, just for comparison, like, I love this stuff. Hannah is fine with it, no problems, but like, you don't go turning it on Disney Plus every other day like I do.
No, you've watched every single Marvel movie over twice now.
Well, oh yeah, I've seen them all
the last 3 months.
Yeah, well, we're not doing daily videos anymore. Your boy's catching up. That's what's happening.
It's funny. I'm trying to think. Like, I haven't seen the Guardians movies in a kind of a long time.
Since we watched them together.
Yeah. It's actually been a while. Yeah. I remember really, really enjoying the Guardians movies.
I think we rewatched them during lockdown.
Yeah.
So that would have been the last time you had anything to do with them.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you sit there and were glued to them at the time either. But
I have a hard time watching movies because I feel like I need to be productive.
Right.
Well, I will say that I thoroughly enjoyed it as much as I did the first time watching Guardians of the Galaxy. I can remember that as much.
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe that's what it is. I think maybe something else that gave it such a good boost is that other than Black Widow, it's pretty much our first superhero movie experience since COVID and since lockdown and since going to the theater was a regular thing. So to kind of go back and have that big experience on big screen gave it an extra edge, and maybe, I don't know, maybe a few more movies down the road we'll have a talk and maybe I'll feel different. But I don't know, because like I'm loving all this Marvel content going on, right?
Yeah.
Because like I liked WandaVision. I liked it. I had no problems. I had no negative feelings. And then Bucky, or the Winter Soldier, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, like, I think a lot of us kind of just were the same. Like, we just love how different WandaVision was. So, like, Winter Soldier, Falcon and Winter Soldier is okay. It's great. But, like, maybe didn't knock my socks off.
Yeah.
But then Loki did. And Loki knocked my socks off on Disney Plus. Not sponsored, just a fan of all things Marvel here. No, Loki was kind of what I wanted. I wanted something way more comic booky. And to be honest with you, you could go sit down and make a graphic novelization of that Loki TV series and put it on paper, and it would read just like a Loki graphic novel did. And that's something I haven't really seen personally since something like Watchmen. I felt that way about Watchmen. Watchmen, the way it was put on screen, that you could just tell it was just a comic book movie. Whereas I don't think you could do that with Christopher Nolan's Batman. Great movies, great villains, great storytelling, but you couldn't. I say this, there are graphic novelizations of those movies, but it's not the same. It's not a page-turning comic book like I felt like Loki was. So Loki set this up for me. And again, if you're not understanding entirely, Loki is a Marvel title, and Suicide Squad, what we're talking about, is a DC title. So it's not the same universe. It's definitely not the same people making it, other than the crossover.
It's like Coke and Pepsi.
Yeah. What a wonderful analogy, Hannah. Thank you. It's hard for me to put what I want to say into words, because, like, I don't think I want what everyone wants. I think there's so many people out there that if I said, hey, do you want this crazy comic book multiverse crossover movie world that's coming, or do you want Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight 4?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would probably say they want Dark Knight. And this is such a difficult conversation for me to have, because I am a huge Christopher Nolan stan. I love Christopher Nolan movies. My favorite number one film, I say The Prestige, which is the Christopher Nolan film before Inception, with Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman playing magicians. One of my favorite movies of all time. So I've
got David Bowie in it. What's not to like?
Yeah, and I have no problem with Christopher Nolan, and I do like his Batman movies. But as someone who read every Batman comic book they could get their hands on growing up, I remember always being not disappointed in Christopher Nolan's Batman movies by any means, because they were always wonderful theater experiences. But I was always like, you know what, the black costume, I want a gray one. But that's also the kind of pickiness that I don't have a taste for. Like, that doesn't ruin a movie for me. But it was just little things. Like, I just knew what I wanted my Batman to be. And in the comic books, Batman is always like 6'9", like, or I don't know exactly. Like, we could probably Google how tall Batman is. I don't know what kind of results we're gonna get. I can't even spell Batman. Okay, this is 6'2", which is about right. I'm 6'5". I'm just shy of 6'6". And I always thought Batman was my height, and just huge build, huge jack. Because in the comic books, even when you see Bruce Wayne amongst people, he's always bigger. Like, It's not like he put on this costume to bulk up in the comic books. So I just always wanted this huge, brutal man that with some platform boots on was essentially 7 foot tall. You know what I mean? Just a few inch big muddy boots, and he's 7 foot tall. That's what I always pictured. That's what I always wanted. And so, with very little exception, basically, I've always been very willing to accept whatever's on screen. And we had a whole podcast the other day. What was the topic of that podcast? We were talking Fast and Furious.
Yes.
I was like, I'm down for whatever. That's kind of my attitude and my personality when it comes to movies. Just whatever, give it to me. But I will say, there was just a little bit of a shadow over Christopher Nolan's Batman movies for me, because there's just one thing I wanted in this world was this big gnarly Batman. So fast forward to the announcement of Ben Affleck playing Batman, I was like, yes. And a lot of people were like, wait, what? Why would you? What? No. But I was excited about it because I personally know how big Ben Affleck is. You don't always get this from his movies, but he's huge. He's as big as I am. I mean, he's not quite as big around, but he's a large man, and with a when he builds up muscle for a movie like Batman, he was the right size. Finally, we were going to the gray costume. I was down for it. and I'm generally happy with what we got, especially now with the Snyder cut and a little bit of a promise of more. Zack Snyder's Batman is confirmed to be in the Flash now. Whether or not Affleck is playing him actually hasn't been confirmed, because the only confirmation is set photos of Ben Affleck's stunt double. But we all assume. I think we're all just generally assuming that means he's back in it. But I'm excited and still hopeful that he'll continue to play Batman, because it's not that I'm saying I want small people to be disallowed from playing Batman. I guess that would be a little sizist of me, but I just want that childhood Batman I always dreamed of. Yeah. But I'm telling you all this because I want the comic book world on screen. This is, if I got to choose, if I got to make the Marvel and DC movies, that's what I'd want. And so for the first time in a while, since at least that promise of Ben Affleck playing Batman and stuff, this look in the way that Suicide Squad went, it was just a payoff of that for me, of that desire.
Yeah. I don't have a vision of what that's supposed to be. So I guess
you didn't grow up watching it all.
I'm fine with whatever.
But I started all that by talking about the Christopher Nolan movies and stuff, because there's room for. I'm not saying any of this should be. I'm just being honest about what I want, and for me, I feel like I'm clear-headed enough to be able to say, if I don't get that, fine. I'm still going to like whatever, because even though all this is still going on, there's now also a Robert Pattinson playing Batman movie coming out, and there's lots of feelings about that, just like when they announced Affleck was playing Batman, just like when they announced what's his name was playing Batman in the Nolan movies, Christian Bale, just like when they announced Clooney, on and on and on. There's no one they're going to announce where anyone's going to be like, oh yeah, totally, 100%. So I'm looking forward to it. But even then, what's so funny is there's enough Batman comic books out there that are different enough from the other comic books. I don't know if you know this, but like, there's at one point, there's like 20 different Batman issues going on written by different people. I don't know if it's this way anymore because I don't buy comic books regularly, but I know when I was a kid, there was always 4 or 5 just going on at the same time. And one of my favorite Batman comic books, I'm of course not going to be able to think of it, and I wish I would get up and get it if they were in this room, but they're in storage. It looks to me like, actually, surprisingly, the Robert Pattinson Batman movies are going to be equally comic booky, but almost in a different way. There was a lot of absurdity to Suicide Squad, just absurdity, but there's absurdity in comic books. But there's also some very serious Batman comic books where they might as well just be like black and white telenovelas, or what's the word for it? Just like
film noir?
Film noir, just simple detective stories. And it's really looking like, I think if I had to make predictions for the Batman movie with Twilight, he would hate my guts for saying that. Robert Pattinson, couldn't think of his name.
Harry Potter.
It's either going to be uncomfortably close to the tone of Nolan, or it's Harry Potter, Cedric Diggory.
I feel like that's better.
I should have said, yeah, 100% should have said, but I couldn't think of it either. It's either going to be uncomfortably close to that tone and simpleness of the Nolan films, or it is going to be just like, it's just going to be a detective story, and the fact that he's in a bat suit's going to hardly matter.
Yeah.
I think. And I would almost like that, because that's very comic book. There's lots of great runs of Batman comic books where Batman's just a detective. There's not this crazy thousands of villains all the time. It's tracking one villain down, and that's that. And there are promises in the visuals and some of the previews we've seen that's kind of going to be what this Batman story is. So this is all a big way of saying that I personally like the way the comic book movies are going.
Yeah,
because it would be very easy, don't you think, at this point for a tiredness, getting tired of superhero movies to set in.
Yeah,
a fatigue.
For sure.
We're definitely at a time where that could happen, so we might as well change it up, and I think the timing's good.
But I mean, we have the big world, the like ongoing stories, movie after movie of all these different characters coming together. Like, we have that story
for sure
with Marvel. Like, DC doesn't need to copy that, but I know that they do want their own empire.
Yeah. Well, I think they've done a good job, because it'd be very easy to make a bunch of origin movies right now, and they're basically starting movies that are in a already mature world. Not mature because we've seen it mature. Like, we saw Marvel movies mature. DC has just launched full into maturity. Batman and all of these movies, all these Snyderverse movies, modern era DC movies, is already like 50.
Yeah, he's been doing this a while.
Yeah, he's been Batman for 20 years, so he's 40 something. I don't know what his age is, but I think it's a good choice. Just we know Batman's parents are dead, Superman's from Krypton. Let's go. And honestly, that's what they're doing. There was some nice backstory in Suicide Squad, but not a crazy amount.
Yeah,
at all. I mean, the only real backstory exposition I remember was for the rat character, which spoiler alerts. But that was just because Taika Waititi played her father. I don't think that's really spoilers on a high level, but
yeah. I mean, the thing that I was kind of surprised with Suicide Squad was the story was not about Harley Quinn. I assumed that it would be because she was the big character from the last one, and she had her own movie. Like, we all like Harley Quinn,
right?
And so I assumed that the movie would be like circling around her, and it really wasn't. She was in it. She was just a big part of it.
She was just a team player like everyone else in it. There were some very good choices for the whole movie. But go watch it if you're into that kind of thing. I will say, just in the interest of complete transparency, it's very rated R. It's brutal. It's blood and gore and innuendo, and it's all there. But I'm fine with all that. No problems here.
Knowing that it's a villain movie, was something that I should have hyped myself up for a little bit more. Because
you didn't expect the brutal, did you?
No, I was like, oh, the one of the very first scenes was just this display of cruelty. Yeah, and you're like, oh. This is gonna be fine. Like this, they're a good person because you assume that, even though he is sitting in a prison in his prison outfit.
We're gonna get to spoiler alerts here because that was one of those setups and payoffs.
It was
because the movie does begin in a way where you're like,
get ready.
For me, I was like completely unnecessary. I was like, I honestly was taken aback by the intro scene and be like, no, that's not good. This shouldn't have happened. But then it pays itself off, and you're like, that was beautiful, actually, it turns out. So, yeah, go watch it on HBO, go see it, or don't. I think a lot of the people who aren't interested in this kind of thing are going to probably have already clicked off. So the rest of you, check it out, and let's maybe have a next week's episode, let's have a little bit of a chat about it with some spoilers and some other stuff we liked about it. Because there's a lot I want to say about it that I can't without spoilers.
Right.
Anything else you want to talk about this prior week or the week to come before we sign off?
We did some fun stuff during our trip, including going to Magnolia. If you want to check out that a little bit more, check out my video.
I should have led with that. I'm so sorry. Obviously, our main channel video coming out tomorrow as of filming this. We'll say way more about your episode, but Hannah's latest episode on her channel is posted. We went to Waco, Texas, and explored Chip and Joanna Gaines' Magnolia silos. That's going to mean a whole lot to some of you and absolutely nothing to some of you. But it was a good episode.
It was fun.
It was fun. I just we just watched it and it was fun. It was a good time. And we were with Ivan and Monique, so you're probably already going to be tipped off to some of that if you follow our friends Ivan and Monique. If not, go search them out as well. That's the name of their channel, Ivan and Monique. It's all spelled like it sounds. But basically, you can go watch Hannah's video, their video in preparation for our main channel video tomorrow if you're watching this podcast when it comes out. If you're watching it the next day, there's a lot of you that will have watched the videos already and now are watching this podcast. It's kind of how it happens for a lot of people. But go subscribe to Hannah's channel. Just search Hannah's Universe on... Is it Hannah Universe? Hannah Universe. Hannah Universe. Just
not plural.
Yeah, not possessive, not plural. It wouldn't be plural.
Yeah, you're right. Possessive.
If it were plural, it would be Hannah Universes. Hannah's Universes. Go subscribe to that. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel, pretty please, and maybe send this video to your mom because maybe she'd like to subscribe. And I'd really like to get this channel well up past 1,000 subs by the time winter gets here. So when we get back into our live show routine, there's a lot more people here to enjoy it with us. But that's it, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us. Come back next time. And until then, peace out.